Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we are joined by Mr. David Bahrami. Now, to give a bit of intro, you graduated in 2015 from PET. Offline, we were talking a little bit about you starting the rugby team, right? You guys were the real trailblazers, as I like to call it. And then we have a very long list of educational achievements to go through, so I had to write it down. There were just so many. So after PET, you went to the University of Guelph. You did your undergrad in biomedical sciences with a minor in biochemistry. From there, you did your first master's, also at Guelph, in biomedical sciences. It was on regenerative medicine and stem cell biology. And then you did a second master's of science in a similar thing, but with cartilage tissue engineering. And then currently you're doing your PhD, also at Guelph, in biomedical sciences with a focus on regenerative medicine. I think I got that all right.
Yeah, you said it perfectly.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for taking your time to be on the podcast. It's going to be a really interesting podcast to talk about, regenerative medicine. This is a huge thing to talk about, I'm sure. Talk about, all your, educational achievements, your journey to get up to this point. So yeah, offline, we talked a little bit about, you started the rugby team, really. You saw a need for it. You got a bunch of the guys together and you were able to compete with a bunch of your friends. Can you kind of tell me, how the experience went?
Well, first I want to give credit to Nick Philippou and some other students at the university because, sorry, not the university, PLE Trudeau High School, because they were the real ones that got together to really make it happen. And then, I heard about the rugby team and wanted to be a part of it. And so I tried out along with some of my other friends. And that's what really brought the team together was, 20 or 30 of us on this team. And, at first, I'm going to be honest with you, I've never played rugby in my life. The reason why I joined the team was because so many of my friends had joined it, and I don't regret it. Although I will say, playing rugby is definitely one of the more physical sports I've ever played. I played hockey my whole life, played basketball, and I've dislocated a few fingers and broken a few bones, but rugby is definitely something else. But nonetheless, playing with everyone at PET and practicing together, it really made my grade 12 experience all the better. And so I really appreciated the fact that some of the guys got together to bring this team to fruition. And I'm so happy to have been a part of it. And I'm hoping, I don't know, but I'm hoping this rugby team still exists.
I think they do. I think they do. Yeah, no, it's you're right. It's a different level of physicality, right? Hockey and baseball, or hockey and basketball, we think are rough sports, but this is next level, right? But I'm really glad you talked about. So offline, we talked a little bit. You mentioned your gratefulness for the community coming together to make this team, but then also you kind of touched on how it gave you confidence to kind of recognize a need and be able to build something from it, right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, inside the classroom though, were there any, standout classes for you or even any other moments outside of rugby that stood out during your high school career?
One thing I will say about PET, it's pretty academically rigorous high school. And when I got to university, I realized how much easier my first year of university was because of how well prepared I was because of the high school teachers that we had. So I was really appreciative, especially the STEM classes that I took. I took the physics, chemistry, biology, and I felt like the courses that we had were almost at an AP level, even though they were just regular university courses. And so, in terms of a specific moment, I would say in grade 11, I took grade 12 physics, and I have a brother a year older than me who was in the same class as me, which was very odd. I've never taken a course with my brother because we're different ages. And we had an opportunity to work with two other students, Jason and Andy, and our project was to build a pinball machine. And we really spent our time with this thing. We spent probably around $500 just to build it with the wood and all the materials. It had a whole software and computer in the pinball machine, something that I was told had never been done before. And the school had actually decided to keep the pinball machine and have our names on it. I don't know what happened to it. I'm not sure if they still display it or show it to the next year of students that come in for physics class. But I think that was a pretty monumental feat for me, was actually being able to build a pinball machine and having the opportunity to do that in a grade 12 physics class.
I've never personally seen the machine, but I think they should totally display it, right? I think that's a great example of you like leaving your mark and leaving your legacy, right? That's something that definitely stands out above the rest. So it sounds like you've kind of always been interested in STEM, right? And it seems like your path is very intentional. After you left PET, like what was kind of like the first moment when you realized that you wanted to pursue something in STEM?
Well, I feel like it's been a long time coming, to be honest with you. Growing up, my father was a very passionate guy, and he would speak to me a lot about science. And my father was a doctor in his home country, so the idea of going into biomedical sciences was a pretty easy one. I had high hopes of becoming a doctor one day. And then, I spent a long time in the hospitals and clinics and realized that maybe being a doctor isn't necessarily for me, but I do definitely want to be in the field of, biological sciences or just life sciences in general. And so that's what kind of swayed me to the idea of working in research, specifically with stem cells, which is really my focus of interest.
Mhm. So you mentioned your older brother, right? Did he have any, sway and, where he decided to go? Did you kind of want to follow in his footsteps, do something completely different than him?
So my brother is completely different than me, very different than me. He had done a biochemistry degree at the University of Guelph as well. But during that time, he had also built a company, a construction company called Sundisk Reno. And at the same time, he was getting into real estate, and he realized that, science wasn't for him. He wasn't as passionate about it as I was, but he really enjoyed real estate. And so he's been doing residential real estate for the past couple of years. And now he has moved on to commercial real estate, and he works for a brokerage called Colliers, which is pretty well known. And so not only that, but on the side, my brother loves to flip houses, and he buys condos, renovates them, and sells them. So that's his passion.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great point, for everyone, right? Follow your passions, don't necessarily follow, what you think will make the most money, right? Sometimes it's helpful, but I think passion is something that has been touched on a lot in this podcast, right? So you mentioned Guelph, right? That's where you went. That's where you've done all your degrees. What were kind of decisions that went into that? Were you looking at other schools? How did you land on Guelph?
Right. Well, my brother went to Guelph first, right? So it made it a lot easier once I applied and got in to want to go to Guelph. That was one of the main reasons, was my brother was there. One of the other reasons was the program itself, biomedical sciences. I had gotten into a few other schools. I got into Queen's University for life sciences, and some other schools for biomedical sciences. But I guess really the main point was my brother being there. But as well, Guelph also, one thing that's really nice about their biomedical science program is that they have an anatomy lab. And so in third year of my biomedical science program, I was able to go and see human cadavers and actually completely dissect them from head to toe, which was an unreal experience, something that's not offered everywhere. And so I think that was one of the highlights of the program for me, for sure.
Great to hear. Yeah, I'm always, curious to see, why people went to the schools they did. It's always really interesting, and I think it helps other people make that decision as well. Why you went to that school, what school you went to, those kind of things. And you've done a lot of further education, right? Has it kind of been like a 10-year plan for you, or has it kind of been like we'll cross that bridge when we get there? Like how did you plan out your future?
Um, a bit of both. So I had applied to medical school originally, didn't get in, and then I decided to do a master's degree. And I was doing, at the time, I was optimizing the quality of the cartilage we were making with the stem cells. And I realized, wow, how impactful stem cells in general can be, for, regardless of if you use them for making cartilage. there's a million different things that we can do with these stem cells. And one thing I'd like to highlight is when we talk about the pharmaceutical industry, for the past 100 years, we've really relied on small molecule drugs like Advil, Tylenol. Those are just some hallmark names. But the past 30 years, it's been more so antibodies that we use, vaccines. And now we're reaching a new era of medicine where we're using cells themselves to treat people. And cells are a lot more complex than a small molecule, and they can do a lot more things than just a small molecule drug. And so when I was doing my master's degree, I realized, there is something here. I'm at the forefront of a revolution in medicine that's currently going on with the use of cell and gene therapies. And so it motivated me even more to keep continuing what I'm doing and pursuing my PhD and doing that line of research with the stem cells. For stem cells, I'd say the main one is regenerative medicine. And what regenerative medicine encompasses is repairing damaged or diseased tissues or organs. So if someone were to have their leg amputated, I don't think we have the technology yet to make a completely new leg. But in terms of in my case, I use stem cells to make cartilage tissue. And so this cartilage tissue is being implanted right now into horses that are suffering from joint cartilage defects. And so when we talk about joints, you can have the knee, the shoulder, the arm, whatever it may be. These joints are prone to the cartilage being degraded over time due to natural wear and tear, or it can happen due to, sports-related injuries, which we commonly see in racehorses. And one thing about joint cartilage is that it's one of the few tissues in the body that once you lose it, it's very hard to get back. And so it's for that reason that we're tissue engineering cartilage tissue with the stem cells to use it as an implant to replace the tissue that was once there. Now, I'm not going to say that the quality of the tissue we make is as good as what's naturally found in the body. But I have high hopes that towards the future in the next 10 to 20 years, the engineering or the technology behind this will be at a point where we'll see superior clinical outcomes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, for the explanation. I had like no idea. Obviously, like I mentioned to you before, I say it all the time. Business kids don't really, understand how the world works a lot of the time. So it's great to hear from an expert on the subject. I saw that you went to at the University of Guelph. Your two masters were in the veterinarian like college. Like, was it always going to be a matter of uses on animals, or like because you mentioned before that you wanted to go into medicine, right? So like, how did you decide like whether you're working with animals or people?
Right. Well, one thing I should highlight is when people do veterinary research, a lot of people often try to translate what they learn about the research to human medicine. So even in our lab, we're using the horse as a preclinical model to eventually translate that to human medicine. And that's actually part of my PhD is I'm engineering cartilage tissue with horse stem cells, and we're implanting it into horses, and we're trying to prove that it works. And then I would translate that, and one part of my project would be to do the same thing with humans, and we would apply for a CIHR grant to be able to do that work in humans.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, like for me to like kind of picture, what it would be like. How big are the implants that we're talking about?
So these implants are made to fix defects that are called focal cartilage defects. So these are large defects, more than 2 centimeters square, right? And the reason why we use the horse as a preclinical model is because when you want to create such a defect, such a large defect in surface area, you need a joint that's large enough. So we couldn't do such research with the mouse, for example. So the implants I'm making can vary in size, but I tend to make cartilage chips that are about the size of like a loonie or a
Okay.
toonie.
Do you have any like further aspirations? Like you mentioned, 10, 20 years from now, you hope you can further that research, but, for you personally, professionally, volunteer work, anything like that, do you have any like future aspirations?
Yeah, well, I know AI is a huge topic right now, right? And I honestly think that AI benefits industries that have huge data sets, complex data sets. And I don't think there's any industry with more complex data sets than life science, right? Trying to model cell behavior, trying to model the differentiation of stem cells into cartilage, these kinds of things are so complex. And I would really love to be able to implement AI into this field. And I know it's up and coming. It's been happening the past few years. I've seen papers coming out of Nature, Lancet, and different journals. And I want to be a part of that. You know, one thing about research that I think people need to realize is how slow it can be sometimes, right? A master's student spends 2 years to do one project, right? And how many master's students are there working on a specific field? So if we can create models using AI that are quite predictive from previous data sets that we have over the years, I think it'll speed up or accelerate our the findings that we get and how we can move forward. So really, that would be one of my goals would be to implement AI into my research.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that. Like you said, it affects, every industry. And yeah, I've seen like some things are testing, drugs on, AI and that kind of thing. Um, Going backwards a little bit, you mentioned that it can be kind of slow, doing these research projects, things like that. What does kind of a day in the life look like for you as a PhD now?
Right. Well, my life's a little different than most PhDs because I also work part-time. So I work 9 to 1 every day, Monday to Friday. So I usually go to work first thing in the morning. Sometimes I'll go to my lab before I go to work, set up anything that I need because when you do cell culturing, there's often a lot of reagents that need to be warmed up for a couple of hours to get to that 37 degrees internal body temperature, which the cells are usually incubated at. So I'll do that, and after 1 p.m., I'll usually head to my lab, or I'll grab lunch and then head to my lab. And it usually involves a lot of just cell culturing, changing the media, then isolating the cells, and then analyzing them for whatever it may be that I'm doing that day. So it's all dependent, but we use a variety of techniques, whether it's biochemistry, histology, um, and gene expression analysis. So on a day-to-day basis, what I'm doing in the lab might be completely different, but my day usually tends to be going to work, then the lab, and then if I have time, I'll usually go to the school gym and play basketball.
No, nice, very nice. Yeah, got to get that, the mental health stuff, physical health stuff, always big proponent of that kind of thing, especially at the end of the day, right? So, yeah, glad you touched on that at the end. It sounds like you're working very hands-on, right, in your PhD, which is probably a lot different from your undergrad, right? But like, how has your kind of approach to learning kind of evolved between the time you were in your undergrad until now?
Um, you know, I felt like in my undergrad, I was told what I needed to learn, right? When you go to class, the PowerPoints are there, the slides are there, the textbook's there. With regards to a PhD, it's kind of like it's self-directed learning. You now need to find the right papers, see how they relate to your research, right? The one thing about a PhD is it's a novel research idea, something that no one else is doing around the world, or at least doing exactly like you are. People might be doing similar work. And so you're always trying to see what's out there and trying to relate it back to you, but it's difficult because there's no one doing exactly what you're doing. So one of the big things about doing a PhD is being resilient because there's going to be a lot of troubleshooting involved. I've never had something just work the first time perfectly. I've always had to do it 2 or 3 times. But looking at other papers online, seeing how they do things, it makes it easier for me to direct myself to know what to do next if this doesn't work.
I'm glad you touched on resilience, and that was going to be my next question. I assume you need a lot of curiosity, a lot of resilience, a lot of critical thinking skills. Is there anything else that has made you successful doing what you're doing?
I say definitely discipline. And I don't think that just goes for my line of work. I think it goes for any line of work. You need to be disciplined. I tell you I'm passionate and I'm motivated, but the motivation's not always going to be there every day, right? Even NBA players that play basketball every day might not want to play a basketball game here or there, right? And the same goes for lab work, especially when things aren't working. So I think it's a matter of being disciplined, and just getting what needs to be done.
Mhm. I really like that piece of advice. Not everyone's going to love everything, and it's really about keeping your head up even when things aren't going right, right? Like it's easy to keep your head up when things are going well, but when things are going wrong, that's when you really need to keep your head up as well. So you touched on a little bit of advice, right? That discipline aspect. Do you have any other like piece of advice or things you would tell yourself maybe when you were, let's say, like 18, going from high school to college? Any like piece of advice for you?
Um, Definitely believe in yourself. I think, I have high aspirations, right? I have big goals, big dreams, and it's important to believe you that you can get them done, right? It's one thing to have a big goal or a big dream, but not believe that you can get it done. So I definitely think self-belief is one thing, but I also think it's very important to build the foundation or to do things so that your self-belief has value, right? If I were to say I want to jump 10,000 feet in the air and I have self-belief, um, I would come across as delusional, right? So when it comes to self-belief, I believe that if you have a really big goal in mind, that you set a bunch of small goals at the same time, and that you get those small goals one by one, build up the confidence, build up the self-belief so that you can get that large goal accomplished. Like, for example, if I wanted to dunk a basketball tomorrow, I know deep down in my heart I couldn't. So it would be delusional of me to say I have self-belief that I can do it. But if I set up a goal saying tomorrow I want to be able to jump 8 feet, then next month 8.5 feet, a month after that I want to be 9 feet. When that time comes, that self-belief will be there because I've done everything in the past to make it come to fruition.
Right. I think it's kind of like a reinforcing cycle of, self-belief to actions, right? Like you can't have one or the other. It has to be both of them, right? So I think that's a great piece of advice. Looking ahead, so you're going to finish your PhD very shortly, right? Or in a few years, let's say. After that, what's in store for you? Like what kind of jobs are you looking at? What do you kind of want your impact to be, after your schooling?
Well, I'm honestly a very curious person. I come up with a lot of ideas, and sometimes I give these ideas to my prof, and sometimes he runs with it, and other times he tells me, forget about it, think of something else, right? So I definitely like the idea of coming up with research ideas and getting grant money and training people and having them, be a part of a team. So the idea of becoming a professor is definitely something I'm thinking about. I also want to do something revolutionary. That was one of my goals, and I think the stem cell industry definitely allows for me to do that because there is so much that we don't know that I could hopefully bring at some point. So I would like to build a biotech company, and being a professor really allows me to leverage the university's resources when it comes to building a biotech company, right? If I have these research ideas that are centered around the R&D that my company would do, well, the government can help me to facilitate with the grant money. I can have students help to perform the R&D. It really facilitates a lot of the work. And so I would like to hopefully remain in academia and be a professor.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very cool. If you need investors, let me know. So you talked about, your professor that's guiding you right now. A big thing when it comes to applying to grad programs is getting that letter of recommendation, right? How did you go about building that relationship and eventually asking for that recommendation?
So, the way it works at the University of Guelph is you literally have to email the profs and just see if they have a position open. It's not like you apply to the program through OMSAS or whatever it might be, and they line you up with a professor. You got to go out of your way to get a professor to take you on, and then you can apply to the university. And so, when I was trying to get into the master's program, I literally emailed every single professor in the department. So it was about 60 professors. I didn't care if they were retired. I didn't care if they were part-time or if they used to work there. I emailed every single one of them. And out of the 60, only one of them said yes, which was more than enough for me. All I needed was one prof. And her name is Dr. Sarah LePage, and I still work closely with her today. And even at my job, she's the principal investigator of the lab that I work at, and she had introduced me to my advisor, Dr. Koch. And so it was through her that I was actually able to meet my current advisor. And so really, I would advise to students that, some students really have a specific research interest in mind, but I would say to begin with, see what's out there and what's available to you, and then, decide on a choice. Because if you only say, oh, I'm only going to email 2 or 3 professors, I only want to do this, the odds are that it's out of their hands. They might not have the funding for you. The cycle already went by. They already selected students. You might be the perfect candidate, but they just don't have the means to take you on.
Right. So that's, one thing you did sounds like it worked out very well for you, right? Like you said, you only need one, right? That's all it takes. On the flip side, do you have any regrets, like throughout your journey that you can share?
Regrets. Um, you know, I feel like when it comes to optimizing things in the lab, I feel like at first I was very slow. I didn't understand how to optimize. I didn't think like a researcher or a scientist. So some of the regret has to do with the amount of time it took me. But then again, it's a learning experience. So now I feel like when I come across something, some trouble, I know who to go to. I know somewhat what to do. I'm a lot quicker than I was at the beginning. And those things come with time for sure. And I also regret not getting an undergrad student earlier. When you get an undergrad student, it makes the process not only quicker, but a lot funner as well.
Right.
So I would definitely say that. And a lot of PhDs and master students, there's some people feel lonely. They feel like they're isolated. They're doing a project that no one knows about, or they're the only ones doing it. So having that undergrad help you really makes the experience a lot more fun, and also being involved in your department.
So I think kind of what you alluded to was a little bit like humility, right? Even though you're a master's PhD student, it's okay to admit that you're still learning, right? You don't do everything perfect, even though you're, a postgraduate student, right? So I think there's a bit of humility in that aspect as well. So, we talked about everything so far, your professional journey, your academic journey. If we were to come back to you in like, let's say 5, 10 years, and we were to say David is, and there's like a blank, like what do you want that blank to be? Like what's your legacy going to be in 10 to 15 or 5 to 10 years?
Oh, wow, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Um, well, first, I hope we can say David has graduated his PhD
Yeah. Yeah.
in 5 years. Um, I I hope I can say that I'm still i- doing stem cell research. I want to say I hope that I'm heavily involved in this field, and I hope that I can also bring a lot of people along with me. I don't think anything gets done as well when you do it alone as you would as a group. And especially in science, some of the bigger and best projects that have ever been done have been done in collaborations with labs across the world. And that's something that I would love to do more of, is collaborations. Right now, for my PhD, we're collaborating with the University of Alberta, and they have a patented protocol which we have exclusive rights to. And so these kinds of collaborations is something that I would love to be more a part of. And so in 5 to 10 years, I'd love to say that I'm a professor with a lab with students who enjoy the research and I have interesting research ideas, and I'm collaborating with people around the world.
That, yeah, really resonates with me. Bringing other people up, I think is a huge thing that, sometimes we get lost in the idea of I want to change the world, whereas I think, a lot of people, it's more we want to change the world, right? Or I want to lead people to act in a way that could change the world, right? Rather than I just want my name to be beside the thing that changed the world. So last question for you to wrap up. If you could nominate, any number of PET grads to be on the podcast, who would they be?
Oh my God. Shall I go to Instagram? Start scrolling through.
Exactly.
Um, you know, I'm more on the science side of things. I think it would be interesting. And I don't know if it's weird to nominate my own brother,
Yeah.
but I think there are a lot of people, one thing about real estate, I've realized how many real estate agents there are in Toronto. I think a few years ago, I heard there was 40,000 new real estate agents coming, and it's such a tough market. And my brother's been in it for a long time. now. He's been doing it for some like 7, 8 years now. And he has a lot of experience with the residential stuff, but also the commercial side of things. And my brother's thinks a lot about passive income, ways to generate income besides his real estate and things on the side. So I think a conversation with him would be very interesting. And I guess he's a very motivating person. So I feel like a lot of people would listen to him and get the urge to want to do the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, my brother, but I feel like I should say someone else. I don't want to just say my brother. Um, someone who I haven't spoken to in a while, but I know they're doing very well, is my friend named Shaquille. Maybe you know Shaquille Subdar. He's at the University of Toronto Medical School. And I haven't spoken to him about it, but I'd love to have a conversation with him about his experience at medical school, because that was something I was thinking about doing. Obviously, I went separate paths. I went somewhere completely different, but I'm curious to know more about how that was for him. So if you were to bring him on the podcast, that would be great.
Wrapping up, thank you so much for your time. I learned a lot about regenerative medicine, something that's completely out of my wheelhouse. But thank you for educating me and the rest of our viewers on what seems like a very innovative but also very useful tool in the future. I'm sure we can all see the potential that it does have. So we wish you all the best with that research. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and we'll see everyone next week. Peace out.